My wife and I have been together for 10 years, and we got married 2 years ago. Recently, we bought a small house together, not even 6 months ago. Unfortunately, things didn't start well. We moved to a small town. I won't give more details to avoid issues. Our house is on a quiet street with a big property next to a beautiful forest. This appealed to us because we like the peaceful surroundings. We plan to adopt a dog and have kids here, so we wanted a big yard for them to play in. Both my partner and I have similar work schedules. I usually get home around 5, and she comes back around 6 most of the days. When we first moved into our new house, everything seemed fine. We spent our weekend unpacking and settling in without any issues. However, on Tuesday night, as we relaxed at home, we suddenly heard loud music coming from our backyard. It wasn't the kind of music you'd hear at a party. It sounded old, like vintage music. We were sure it wasn't from our neighbors' yards because they were too far away. It was definitely coming from our backyard. My wife and I were instantly in alarm mode. All the windows were closed. Suddenly, we heard the music louder and we were both scared. We didn't know where it was coming from. I decided to open my window to hear it better. It was an old song, maybe from the 50s. It sounded eerie, even though it's supposed to be a cheerful song. But hearing it in our backyard was terrifying. We were still getting used to the new house, but we thought there should be a switch to turn on the backyard lights downstairs. I quickly went downstairs to the back door and tried the switches next to it. One of them made the backyard lights come on. I didn't see anyone outside. When I opened the door, the music got louder, making it obvious. But when I stepped onto the grass, I realized the music wasn't coming from the backyard. It was coming from the woods. The song kept playing while I stood outside, looking around. When the song finished, everything went quiet again. It seemed like someone might have been playing a silly prank for the housewarming, but it wasn't funny. I went back to my wife and explained that I thought it might be some kids trying to frighten the new people in town for some unknown reason. But as I said it, I realized how silly and strange it sounded. Why would kids do something like that? However, the next night, it happened again. Just after we switched off the lights in our bedroom, we heard loud music coming from outside. It was even louder this time. This time, a different old song. My wife and I glanced at each other once more, feeling genuinely disgusted and worried. We had hoped that what had occurred was a one-time event, but unfortunately, it was happening again. As I peered out of the window, I noticed something on the grass below. It wasn't a person, but there was definitely something there. I informed my wife that I was going to investigate, but she suggested calling the police instead. I agreed, saying, "Yeah, we can do it in a few minutes. Let me check it first." I went outside with the idea that I needed to show I'm the one in charge at home, not just to my wife, but to anyone who might think they could bother us because we're new here. When I was in the yard, I noticed something small in the grass making a creepy noise. It turned out to be an old radio. I turned it off and looked up at the window where my wife was watching. I showed her the radio, shouting that someone left it there to scare us with the music. But her reaction surprised me. Instead of agreeing, she started yelling for me to run inside. She kept screaming, "Run!" I shouted. "Why?" She screamed back, "There are people behind you." My heart raced as I turned to look. In the woods, 3 figures stood spaced apart, facing me. They weren't coming closer, just standing. Panicked, I ran inside and locked the door. Upstairs, my wife was in tears. I reassured her and called the police. They came quickly. We were afraid of hearing knocks on the doors or windows while we waited. My wife and I were really scared when the police arrived. We told them everything that happened, and I showed them the radio on the ground. I asked them if they could take it for evidence, and I made sure to mention that I only touched the top part with the handle. The police agreed and took the radio. Then, they checked the nearby woods with their flashlights for a few minutes, maybe to scare off anyone who might still be there. After they left, we still felt scared and vulnerable, but thankfully those people didn't come back. This day really could come out of a horror movie. I hope they never come back. and since then, it never happened again. When I was 10, my family moved to a new house in the countryside. It was near a small village, and we were used to living in a quiet area. Our new place was on 4 acres and very secluded. On the second night, our dog, who slept in my room, started barking and growling in the middle of the night. When I sat up, he seemed happy to see me but kept barking at something in the corner. I checked the closet but found nothing. I told my dog Casper to be quiet, and he listened, but he kept reacting to something by lifting his head off his bed now and then. The day after, there was a knock on our front door. My dad opened it while I was in the living room watching cartoons. I heard everything that was said. The man at the door said his name was Francis, our neighbor from next door. Dad asked me to come and say hello, so I did. Francis seemed a bit strange and distant. Even though I was only 10, I could tell that. But I suppose he was friendly enough. The next day, I was playing games in the backyard. My dad was out front mowing the lawn, and the rest of my family wasn't home. He was wearing the farmer's head and overalls, and he had a weird accent. There wasn't even a fence between the front and backyard to keep people out. When he asked what I was doing, I told him I was playing on my Game Boy. Surprisingly, he knew what it was and even tried to imitate some figures out of games, thinking it was funny. But instead of being amused, I felt uncomfortable. It was starting to dawn on me that there was something strange about him. When my dad came out to the backyard with the lawnmower, he paused as soon as he spotted Francis sitting beside me. He came closer, greeted us warmly, but his puzzled expression and tone revealed his confusion about Francis' presence. Without directly addressing it, he instructed me to go indoors and do the dishes. I understood his subtle message to keep me away from Francis. Later on, he returned and inquired if Francis had been around. I confirmed that he had. That's when my dad made it clear that he didn't want me associating with Francis anymore, urging me to inform him if Francis showed up again. He said I shouldn't hang out with Francis anymore and to tell him if I saw him again. A few nights later, our dog woke me up with his barking. He was staring at the window. I went to listen outside but heard nothing. Then suddenly, I heard Francis making funny noises from Pokemon in an old man's voice. Scared, I ran to my dad yelling about Francis being outside my window. My dad rushed outside but couldn't find Francis, so he went to check next door at his house. This person named Francis wasn't actually living next door like we thought. So, my dad decided to check with all the other houses nearby, but nobody knew anyone named Francis. Worried, my dad called the police to tell them about this mysterious man. The police promised to keep an eye out for him, and the story even got on the news. After that, Francis, or whatever his true name was, never showed up again. It was truly scary for all of us. He was just walking around like he knew us for years. Thinking back makes me still feel uncomfortable.